Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your Ultimate Lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code Stardust to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
What's up, guys? This is Daniel Logan, Boba Fett from Attack of the Clones, The Clone Wars, Book of Boba, Skywalker Saga game, and hopefully many more things in the Star Wars galaxy. You are listening to Jay and Dennis on Podcast Stardust. Yep, this is the way I've spoken.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we're going back to 2017 with a discussion of the Captain Phasma comic from Marvel. But first, Jay, where can we be found around the internet?
We can be very easily and conveniently found on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the dish is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So this will be a full spoiler discussion of Captain Phasma, but again, this comic came out 7 years ago. So if you haven't read it yet and you're intrigued and you don't want to be spoiled by the discussion, then you can find it on Marvel Unlimited. It's available as a graphic novel now on Amazon and other places as well. Go check it out and come back on that. But we're just going to dive into it. This was written by Kelly Thompson with art by Marco Cicchetto. Colorist was Andres Mosa. Letterers was VC Clayton Cowles. Cover artist was Paul Renaud and some work by Scott Wilson. And the editorial for Marvel was Heather Antos and Jordan D. White. This comic originally came out, as like I said earlier, as part of the Journey to the Last Jedi multimedia publishing initiative. And this is a story that takes place right after The Force Awakens. And Jay, it details Captain Phasma's escape from the garbage chute after she got thrown in there, just as Han, Solo, Finn, and Chewbacca talked about, and what she does to kind of cover her tracks on this. So before we dive into the details, what do you think about this comic overall?
Well, I actually thought this was a pretty phenomenal comic overall. I really enjoyed it quite a bit. And I guess it's probably, who of us to mention that the reason this came up is because in our news episode, we were talking about who would we like to see featured in comics. And I said, I would love to see like a Captain Phasma. And you said, actually, there is one.
Mm-hmm.
But this brings back all the feels of the novel itself, and just getting into the psyche of Phasma and everything that happened with her upbringing on what was the name of the planet that she's from, Parnassus or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I thought that the illustrations were amazing, and I could hear Phasma's voice in my head the entire time, and it just gets right down to the fact that she's a survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And she's going to do whatever it takes to tie up those loose ends and make sure that she comes out on top, or at least the better for things. So I thought this was amazing. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that what you just said, that is in fact the conclusion of these 4 issues. She says that right at the end. Now, we will save the discussion about how and when she says that, but she just comes out right and says it. It's like, how could this be any other way? I'm a survivor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and this 4-issue series, like you aptly just described, is all about that. And we get that feeling right off the bat because, there's a big hole blown in the wall where she was in the garbage chute, and she walks right out it. And, she finds that Starkiller Base is under attack, And of course, she knows this because she's the one that just brought down the shields under duress from Han, Finn, and Chewbacca. And so she's decided that she needs to delete that record because she's, of course, committed treason against the First Order doing so. And she starts working on this false log about how she's trying to figure out who it was that brought down the shield. She doesn't know what happened. And so she does that. She finds a terminal, she deletes that log, but then it occurs to her someone else could have accessed that before she had an opportunity to leave it. And indeed, she discovers that someone by the name of Lieutenant Sol Rivas. That jumped right out to me. Sol.
Yes.
Here,
Right? I know. Me too.
We got Sol in the Acolyte, and now we have another one here in this comic. So fancy the timing. I would not have remembered that if we had not just been doing the Acolyte at the same time. But anyway, and she tries to pin this all down on him, and she starts pursuing him through the base. He doesn't even know he's being hunted, and she's looking for him, taking shots at him. And he eventually makes his way to a hangar where they've got some TIE fighters, and goes to take off on that. But this didn't really surprise me that she would do anything like this. But what did you think?
Well, I thought it was very clever. And I did like the touch of when she was in the garbage chute and she was trying to get out and her blaster bolts were ricocheting, and all I could think of in my head was, I've already tried it. It's hermetically sealed. You think of Luke's voice. So she finds this Lieutenant Rivas or however we want to pronounce his name. And she's like, oh, this is my perfect scapegoat. I must hunt him down and I must kill him because he's my loose end.
Yeah. And there's a couple neat little moments that happen as she's going through this pursuit. She takes shots, but then the chaos that's going on in the base prevents the shots from landing. She has to repel from one level to another to get there. She ends up outside and she sees Kylo Ren in a saber duel with someone that she can't identify, but we know that to be Rey.
Right.
At that point. And then she gets to this hangar and we meet the other main character of the series, a pilot by the code number TN3465. And there also happens to be one of those black BB units around as well. So, we'll get into more about TN3465 as we work our way through the issues. But what did you think about her overall?
The pilot?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I thought she was awesome. I mean, she was obviously part of the First Order because she felt like that was something she wanted to do, was to give service. And I think that that's a lot of what we see with stormtroopers and pilots and whatnot that join up with either the Empire or the First Order, is that they don't think that they're doing bad. They think that they are upholding a legitimate way of life and that what they're doing is for the greater good. And so she gets caught up with Phasma, and Phasma is very careful about not personalizing things with her, especially at first. And the pilot is very okay with this. I did expect them to give her some sort of a name, based on her designation, and they never did that. And I was because I was trying to think like 3465, like what could they call her? Kind of like Finn, FN, Finn. But yeah, I thought she was a pretty cool addition to this.
Yeah, she came off to me as someone who was well conditioned by the First Order because when she's talking to Captain Phasma, it's yes, Captain, understood, Captain. Right. She does all that. She doesn't really question the orders through these first couple of issues of the comic. And to your point, she never gets any name. But just like Finn, she doesn't even know. I don't think she, we don't know this definitively. Finn pointed out to Poe that, FN2147, that's the only name they ever gave me.
Right.
He has no idea what his original. I don't think she knows what her name is, other than this code number TN3465. And other than when they're undercover on this planet coming up, that's how she gets addressed by Phasma at all times. She doesn't have the rank where she gets to pick any type of a name like that.
And of course, to Phasma, they're all just faceless, nameless cannon fodder. She says even later on here in a little bit. And so it's not until after she removes her helmet and they change on that planet where they end up that Phasma kind of sort of personalizes her, but not really.
Right. So that gets us into the next issue. As the first issue is ending, they've left Starkiller Base on this TIE fighter as Starkiller Base is about to explode. We come to find out that the BB unit was doing some maintenance on the TIE fighter, so they don't like have all their weapons and functioning hyperdrive, but neither does Revis's TIE fighter that he took off in. So they pursue him to a planet called Leprora, and it's inhabited by the Leprorans. So they disembark from the TIE fighter. They find Revis's TIE fighter, and they disable the communications. Now, Phasma offers up the excuse that she doesn't want him drawing anyone into his traitorous web. Mm-hmm. But I think we all know what she's really doing is, if he hasn't done so already, she doesn't want him to have the opportunity, if he somehow circles back to, especially if he spots Phasma, to get it out there what she did.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, she's very one-minded when it comes to hunting him down, because she does not want that getting out, that was actually her.
Yeah, exactly. And so, they've got this BB unit. It can't get around on the terrain there because it's too rocky. It's just a bunch of cliff type faces. And so TN-3465 has to carry it. And they finally find an abandoned hut, and it's got clothes there, and they decide to put on disguises. Now, this is where we get into what you were talking about a moment ago. TN-3465 asks, well, what will my name be? Because they need to have an alias. They don't really know where they are, who's around, and the like. And if she's going around being addressed as TN-3465, that could raise suspicion. So Phasma has no imagination whatsoever and says, I'll go by captain and you'll go by pilot.
Right. Functional. It works,
And I guess easy to remember as well. And TN-3465 is like, yes, captain. So
yeah, right.
And then they get attacked by a giant sea monster called a swell. Phasma defeats it. And when they get to surface, I've got them in their notes as the Leprian, but that's actually the language they speak. The Leporans, I guess, are what they actually are. They encounter the inhabitants of this planet, these Leporans. Now, they've got an interesting backstory here. They came to this planet from elsewhere, and once they arrived, they destroyed all their technology, and they started an agrarian society. But then the climate went bad, and the tides shifted, and then these other sea monsters, the Aurora, show up and started terrorizing them. Mm-hmm. So what'd you make of the Leporans?
I thought it was very clever. I mean, as you said, they kind of backed up from technology, almost going off the grid kind of a thing. And then it ended up revolting against them, which is what Phasma ends up saying, later, like they are not indigenous to this planet. They're actually invading. They're the ones that are not welcome here. And I liked their, the way that they spoke, and Phasma latched onto that right away, and she knew exactly how they were speaking. So they had this sort of broken English or broken basic, but in their own language. So they have like Dar-en and Aura, and with the little apostrophe. So you kind of got the idea that it was more of a chopped kind of a language. But one thing that I thought of when they later on, when you see some of the helmets that the populace was wearing, were the exact same ones that Phasma had on at first. And which I think is also very interesting. You never see Phasma's face, like, ever in this comic. It's always covered. But, I thought to myself, well, didn't they realize that she was kind of out of place in not one of them, but yet she had their clothes on? It's almost like the old joke that goes back to Lando, stealing Han's clothes.
Right. Indeed. So. Yeah. So that gets us into issue 3. They meet or one of the Leporans, Dar-en, takes them to basically where it is that Revis is believed to be, but it's surrounded by these Aurora, and it's high tide. And so, they find out that, low tide is in the morning, and that's also when the creatures sleep. So that would be a better time to approach. Phasma and the pilot meet with Alien. That's how I'm guessing you pronounce this, Ali''ANE. And they're asking, where can, you have this very unusual necklace. Where'd you get it? Where can we find mine? But Alien refuses to tell them. And so it turns out that they still have one ship left on this island that they didn't completely destroy, and it still has some weapons aboard. And this is where Phasma's like true colors really come out. She takes Darren takes him she defies Allian, and they begin to repair the ship. Phasma changes back into her armor. Oh, as an aside, it's really funny. Like Phasma immediately like drops the code name for herself. She starts calling herself Phasma again.
Mm-hmm.
She does not refer to herself Captain. Pilot TN-3465 is still pilot, but Phasma's
Right.
Phasma and all this.
Where did her armor come from? I mean, did they
She
just
must
go
have
back
backtracked to pick it up, I suppose. But any rate, and then she tells 3465 to put her uniform back on because they're done hiding.
Mhm.
And she makes this big rallying speech to the Leporans about, taking up the forbidden arms and fighting the sea monsters and basically, fighting for their freedom and stuff like that. But it is really, and we're kind of crossing into the fourth issue as well. It's this big ruse. She does
Right.
not care about them. And despite the fact that TN-3465 is complimenting her, it's like, hey, this is a great thing we're doing for these people. And Phasma doesn't even deny it. She's like, this is, don't be a fool. I need an army. They're cannon fodder.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, so it's interesting because we've been talking about the Acolyte and we've been talking about the Sith and the things a lot lately. They would totally go with the ruse, and they would be talk about, getting freedom and, even if they did have a selfish mode and stuff like that, but that's not Phasma. She's pretty straight about all this.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And, a couple of things I wanted to address there. First of all, the pilot TN-3465, she doesn't put her helmet back on. So
Mhm.
she changes back into her pilot uniform, all but the helmet, number
Mhm.
one. The necklace, did you think, I as soon as I saw it, I thought Kyber.
Right.
But then they never addressed that again. It's a very unusual necklace that came from the ship. So I was wondering if maybe there was more to that. And that was one of the reasons why Phasma wanted to get to the ship, wasn't just because of the weapons, but because perhaps, the Kyber that was there, not necessarily that it meant anything to her,
Mhm.
but, it's something that maybe she could have used as leverage even later on. But yeah, I mean, Phasma, that rallying speech, as you put it, that she gave them was very inspiring. I mean, they were all on board and ready to drop their non-technological ways and, rising up to this new leader, essentially, that was going to help them to defeat this. And this poor pilot was just, appalled, basically, that, oh my gosh, we're not really going to help these people at all with
Mhm.
what is actually going on here.
Right. And in the midst of all this, when they're like trying to climb to up the side of the cliff where they think Revis
Oh
is,
yeah.
Phasma has a flashback to Parnassus. And, she even says the name Civ. And
Uh-huh.
TN-3465 like, but who's Civ? And
Right.
that's hard to understand who she is if you haven't read the Phasma novel that
Mhm.
Delilah S. Dawson wrote there. But I thought that was a pretty cool tie-in.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I had to go back and look up some of that in the book.
Mhm.
And just the fact that, Parnassus was such a rocky planet as well, and this whole climbing thing. And so it was just really off character for her to lose herself at that moment and say, call the pilot Civ. So I didn't know if maybe from then on Phasma was going to refer to her as Civ, kind of like a cover up. Oh, well, I've given you a name now. It's Civ.
Right,
But she didn't.
right.
So,
She just kind of blew the whole thing off.
right. But I agree. It was a very nice touch and tie into the novel.
Mhm. So they get there to this mini base. I'm not exactly sure what it is, what it was. And Phasma launches the attack with the help of TN-3465 on these monsters. And the Leporans rally their side and start fighting. But once the monsters are kind of occupied, Phasma doesn't stick around. She goes straight after Revis. And she gets to the top of the tower. She finds Revis, who is chained up. And she says they both know what they know. She tells him to confess. And at first he plays dumb and so like he can't confess to something he didn't do and he doesn't even know what he's talking about. But then he switches and he's like, I can't confess to something I didn't do, and I know that you lowered the shields. And she keeps saying, confess, confess. I hope maybe she was trying to record it. But
Oh,
eventually,
maybe.
yeah,
Yeah.
but eventually she just gives up and shoots him. So she's accomplished her goal. She's got her scapegoat. She's killed the scapegoat. The scapegoat can't say anything. We have one problem. TN-4365 oversees this.
Mm-hmm.
You see, overhears and sees this. And, she knows what this means, that she'll get killed if Phasma finds out. But, she knows that she's basically saying, I don't know anything. This is never going to get out. I'm never going to tell anybody. I'm not going to say anything. But they get, and so when Phasma encounters her after that, TN-3465 attempts to cover for this by saying she was chasing off some of the Aurora and then plays dumb, asks Phasma if she found Rivas and if it was done. And then she basically says, yeah, unfortunately I wasn't able to interrogate him, but yes, it's been taken care of.
Mm-hmm. So I want to backtrack for just a second with the whole attack on these monsters and the way that they did it by electrocuting them. And, we kind of get a little bit, this is where, again, Phasma is so good at calculating strategy, because early in the realization of what the planet that they were on, Phasma kind of tests out the water and she says it's salty, but not overly so. And, salt water, of course, is a good conductor of electricity. So that's how they end up defeating these monsters, which I just thought was really, really cool. And so do you think that Phasma knew that the pilot was there the whole time witnessing this, or was it just in the pilot's clumsiness of speaking to her about, like when Phasma said, well, where were you? Oh yeah, I was with the colonists or whatever she said. Or do
She
you
was
think
chasing
that
out the Orans, yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
do you think she thought that the pilot was there the whole time, or do you think it was just in her clumsiness that she figured it out?
Well, you're getting to the end, and let's put a pin in that for just a second, because I want to discuss the intervening scene between there real quick, and then I'll answer your question. Okay, so they've had that exchange, and then they're going to head back to the ship, and TN-3465 wants to go back and help out the Leporans. And Phasma is like, no, we're not doing that. It's the, we're just, that they were mean to the ends and we're done. So we're going to go back to the ship. And she tries to justify it. But Phasma says, no, the Leporans don't belong on this world. They're colonists and the planets reject them. They're destined to die here.
Yeah.
And even earlier in the issue, when they got into the battle with the Rorans that started the whole thing off, they were getting overwhelmed. And TN-3465 said, hey, we have to pull back. And Phasma was like, nope, we're not doing that. Once the Rorans were in battle, they left. And so, she completely used these. But what did you think about this excuse that, they were colonists and, the planets rejected them and therefore they deserve to die?
Well, it kind of goes in line with even what the colonists were trying to do in rejecting their own technology. And it was sort of like a circle of life kind of a thing. But of course, it's a very convenient excuse for Phasma to disassociate herself from, anyone in general. And again, it kind of goes back to the novel in her upbringing that she really was scarred by a lot of the things that happened there. And so I think that was kind of her way of, pushing it off so that she didn't become in any way, shape, or form have the ability to personalize these people.
Yeah, because to me, they played off as two things. One, she did not care about these people at all. No. And, and she just wanted to get back to the First Order when it came down to it. And she was not going to risk herself on their behalf. And two, it was, her history did come, Parnassus was a dystopian world where they were fighting for survival, whatever they could get. When, that First Order ship crashed there, they were, it was Brundle Hux, right? The older Hux that was there, they were in awe of that. They hadn't seen anything like that for ages. So she's used to this type of, this dystopian planet situation, but she still had no sympathy for these people. And so I don't know, there's some disingenuity that came out of this from her. And I don't know that the average comic book reader, if they hadn't read Phasma, would have picked up on that. But at any rate, it was something that stuck out to me. So they get back to the ship and there's a few repairs to be made, but before that can get done, Phasma shoots the BB droid. And then she tells the pilot, hey, turn around, get on your knees. And the pilot starts pleading with her. I didn't see anything. I don't know anything. And she says that, and then this is where she says, I'm a survivor no matter what the cost. And you're a loose end. And, and again, TN3465 says, I didn't see anything. I don't know anything, please, I won't say anything, whatever. It doesn't matter. Phasma takes care of her. So to answer the question you brought up earlier, whether Phasma knew she was there or not, I love that there's ambiguity with that, that, whether she knew it or not. I think Phasma would have killed her just to make sure, especially seeing what just happened with Rivas, that she had to track him down from one planet to another, that she was going to kill the pilot regardless, because she couldn't take that chance.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. That she probably did plan on killing this pilot the entire time, but she did kind of in some way have this is going to sound weird, but she did have a little bit of a politeness to her, I guess, in killing her, because she said something along the lines of, I was careful this will be quick. Like she didn't just clumsily kill this pilot. Yeah, there you go. There's the words I'm looking for. But she did it in such a way that at least it wasn't careless.
Yeah, there was no malice there.
Right. She was just like, I have to do this. I'm sorry, but this is happening.
Yeah. I mean, it's just simply, it's like, I'm a survivor no matter what the cost. You're a loose end. I can't take that chance. Therefore you die. It's the whole, it's not personal thing. It's like when people say it's just business, it's not personal. It's, in this case, it's survival. It's not personal in this situation. But then, she gets in the TIE fighter and she goes to leave and she's finishing up her log and she slips up by referring to TN3465 as pilot.
She says like hi, and then she goes back into her call sign.
Yeah. And so you could see that she did start to form a little bit of that personal connection there, which is kind of what she had with Civ before she abandoned her too.
Exactly. Yep.
A consistency of character when it comes down there. And, she makes up the excuse in the log that she was unable to interrogate Rivas and that the pilot and BB-8 were casualties. She gets back to one of the First Order Star Destroyers, and she reports to Hux, and she explains how she was hunting down Rivas, was a traitor. And his response to all that is, I should have known that even an exploding planet could not kill you nor impede your devotion to the First Order, Phasma. And her response was, indeed, to all of that, because none of that is true. An exploding planet may not even kill her, but it has nothing to do with her devotion to the First Order. It's all about survival and, her not wanting to be found out and risking what she's got with the First Order.
Now, do you think that Hux kind of thought that maybe she was the one that lowered the shields? Because, I mean, the two of them have definitely shared secrets themselves. They've been in cahoots with each other. So do you think that he might have suspected that, but of course he's not going to let on?
I don't know that he would necessarily suspected that. I suspect he might. That's clumsy of saying. I suspect he might have suspected. I guess that he might have suspected that there was more to this story than she was letting on, that it wasn't the entire truth. Because in his own way, he's kind of a survivor. They plotted together. They plotted the death of his father.
That's what I meant by in cahoots.
Yeah, is he Brendel? Brendel and Armitage are the two names. Doesn't matter. But and
that's right. Armitage is his dad. Brendel is this one. Yes.
Right. And so he does say, I'm looking forward to reading your report and stuff like that. So I suspect he knew that there was more to the story letting on, that she would have been the one to lower the shields. I don't know that he would necessarily guess that, but he knows the type of person she is, because, I mean, he was a survivor. He was trying to figure out how to get rid of Kylo Ren. And that's why he was feeding information to the Resistance and the Rise of Skywalker there. So, that's the type of people they are.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a story that's easy to get through fast because it really is a fast pace. There's dialogue, but there's not a ton of it. And it is a very straightforward story about Phasma tracking down Rivas in order to cover her tracks. But I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was fun to go back and reread this.
Well, I enjoyed it for the first time, and I give huge kudos to Kelly Thompson, because obviously this writer gets Phasma and, really did encapsulate who Phasma is and the things that she's willing to do to survive. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah, there is a I think I mentioned on the news when we were talking about this last that there is a one shot from the Age of Resistance that covers Phasma as well that we may need to get into some point. It's got some similarities here, but this is a good companion piece to the Phasma novel by Della Dawson. So if you've enjoyed this and you want more about Phasma, I'd definitely check that one out as well.
Oh yes, for sure.
All right. Any other final thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I think we're good. I mean, I really am glad that we did this. So I'm glad that it came up in our news discussion and that we were able to talk about this on the show.
Indeed. Yeah, it's fun to go back into some of these older comics that we haven't talked about from time to time.
Yeah.
And especially when you can get like 4 of them like this and cover them. So we'll look for another one for the near future and do that at some point. But anyway, at this rate, just want to thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust on our discussion of Captain Phasma. We hope you've enjoyed it. And if so, then make sure you hit subscribe to Podcast Stardust and you'll get all of our shows every week. Right now, we are 3 shows per week with a typical Disney Plus review, a news episode, and some other discussion each week. And also like to remind you can find our entire catalog shows over on retrozap.com, which is home to everything else that's on the network, and including shows that cover retro culture, superheroes, Dune, Star Trek, and a whole lot more. As always, we greatly appreciate your 5-star ratings, reviews on whatever podcatcher it is that you use to catch your shows, especially if that's Apple Podcasts. And it means a lot to us when you share the show and your favorite episodes on social media with your friends. So with that in mind, Jay, I want to remind everybody where we can be found on social media and elsewhere on the internet.
Absolutely. So we are very conveniently found on Instagram, Facebook, and X at Podcast Stardust. And we have tons of other places that you can connect with us. One of those is both of our YouTube channels. So the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. And it also allows you to leave reviews and comments. So please engage with us there. And if you need some fun ideas for all things Star Wars, head over to Pinterest and check out one of our many boards over there. And then if you want to engage with us in real time, you can head over to our Discord room, which is part of the RetroZap Discord server. So you'll find all kinds of geekery kinds of things to talk about. So all the things that Dennis was mentioning and all the great shows that are over there also have their own room. So you can hit up the link in our show notes if you're interested in that. Also in our show notes is the link to our TeePublic store, where you can pick up one of 7 different Podcast Stardust logos on a variety of different things. So whether you are storming the side of a cliff or you're going to the beach, to battle some monsters, you can find something for everybody. So the link to that will also be in our show notes. And if you are in need of a lightsaber, you can head over to Saber Masters, where they have a wide variety of different battle-ready sabers that you can pick from. And chances are you'll find something to fit your Jedi or Sith needs. So once again, the link to that will be in our show notes. And if you do pick something up, make sure that you use the code STARDUST at checkout, and that will get you an extra $10 off and also helps to support the show. So another show that you can support is Warp Trails. So Dennis, why don't you tell everybody what you got going on with that?
Right. So Warp Trails is the podcast dedicated to Star Trek that is hosted by myself and my wife, Beth. We've been primarily covering the shows that have been on Paramount Plus. So that is Discovery, Lower Decks, Picard, and Strange New Worlds. We're gearing up for the 5th and final season of Lower Decks. And then in the future, we'll have the Section 31 movie and the Starfleet Academy series that's coming out as well. So we can't wait for those. So if you want to get those, you can just find them on the RetroZap podcast feed, or you can go to retrozap.com, which has got them all in a more convenient location. Jay, what is the latest in the world of cosplay?
All right. Well, I don't have any cons or anything like that coming up until probably September, but you can always catch my escapades over on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And you can catch me as Ahsoka, 2 different versions of Hera, the 4th Sister Inquisitor, my original concept Mandalorian based on Tahiri Vela, as well as some other fun things. So it's a great community. So check that out at j.snipscosplay.
All right, upcoming on the show on Friday, we will be getting into episode 7 of The Acolyte, and then on Monday, it'll be time for a look at some Star Wars news. So with that, thank you all for listening to episode 753 of Podcast Stardust. Have a great rest of your week, and until next time, may the Force be with you.